So couple things before we start. We have an Omega 1 that starts this Friday at 7 o'clock this evening, in the evening. It starts this Friday. I believe there's still some seats available. Last time I looked, I thought there was like 36 or so people registered. So if you know somebody who's interested in attending the program, still not too late for you to show up. I just saw that.
Practicing.
I also wanted to thank everybody who showed up for the couples program. We really had a good time doing that, so thank you. And we've had several requests of people, not just you guys, but we've had several requests of people to do another one. So that's something that we're looking onto the calendar to get scheduled. I want to tap on the note of the donations. I really thank the people who've been sending in donations. We are not caught up by far, but at least we're making some headway to get us paid for the next couple of programs. So I'm very grateful to all of you who've been making those donations. And of course, I'm going to make my plea continue to make those donations. Somebody had texted me earlier to see if you could do a monthly donation, and you can. It's actually very simple. If you just go onto the donation button, it takes you to the PayPal page, and then there's a box right underneath it that says make this reoccurring monthly. Just click that box, and that's a very nice thing to do. I know some people used to like to do monthly donations. You know, since we lost our building, a lot of people thought we disappeared. And so there are some people who are quite excited to find out that we're still here. So I'm very happy about that as well. I made some connections with people in California recently, which I was excited to do that as well. Anyway, so that's the donations. And the other thing, yes, we have an Omega 4 scheduled. So there is a 4 coming up. It's in the end of June, but you have to have taken an Omega 2, and we couldn't get a 2 in between now and then. So if you haven't done an Omega 2 or a Delta 2, you won't be able to attend the program. And if you have, then you will be able to attend the program. Somebody just said that they can't see the video. Just checking to see if you have full strength, Mark. I just got a message. Anyway, so that's the information about that now. So tonight's topic, do you jump on the bandwagon? This kind of came to me because I don't want to get political here, but you know, all the tension and upset about the teachers, Red for Ed, and then the controversy and the and I'm not one who jumps on bandwagons. I'm not one who likes to take a cause, never have been. But it got the idea in my head, what is it that causes people to do that? I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, just what is it in people that causes people to do that? I know I'm one who has a tendency to step back, observe, and only speak if requested. Like if somebody wants my advice or opinion on something, I'm not somebody who's going to go out and say, this is what you got to do. Although there are times when I do have a voice. But anyway, that's really what got me thinking about this, is the concept of jumping on the bandwagon. And I'm using the term jumping on the bandwagon because what I'm aware of in my life is sometimes I see a cause and then people jump on it, not because of the cause, but because of what's happening because of the cause. So they get wrapped up in the excitement of the rebel or the rioting and not so much what they're standing for. And sometimes people don't even realize why they're fighting, but hey, we're fighting. And so I thought that's one of the things that would capture my attention. So I found this quote by Thomas Jefferson. He says, "I never consider a difference of opinion in politics, in religion, in philosophy, as a cause for withdrawing from a friend." Now I find this very appropriate, especially in the most recent years of our political system. How many families have been pulled apart because somebody's Democratic or somebody's Republican and this person said that and that person said that. And before you know it, we have families infighting over politics. Now, it's not something new. I'm very aware of that. It's not something new. People take offense, they take sides, they get their feelings hurt, they write those nasty emails, they unfriend people, which I think is really funny. People get upset when they're unfriended. So much so that Facebook now hides it so you don't know you're being unfriended because they don't want you to be upset that you got unfriended. I think that's funny. I'd like to get a notice, so-and-so unfriended you. I mean, well, thank you. Anyway, I was thinking about the families fighting, and I don't know if many of you know about the Hatfields and the McCoys. Now, the reason why I picked this is twofold. The Hatfields and McCoys. George Adair, the founder of Omega, is a descendant of the Hatfields. The Hatfields lived on the West Virginia side, and the McCoys lived on the Kentucky side. There was a river, I don't remember the name of the river, but there was a river that ran through it. The cause of the feud is debatable. Some say it was the Civil War, some said it was land possession, and some people said it was just revenge killing, going back and forth and back and forth. Dozens of people died. Dozens of people were thrown in jail. It lasted for 10 years. This is just families fighting. Families. So it wasn't even like government or, teachers, students. It was families, just two families that were just fighting with each other. And if you were a Hatfield, you weren't allowed to associate with a McCoy. If you were a McCoy, you were not allowed to associate with the Hatfields. I mean, there was like strict lines, division, only this person or that person. And so, like I said, that lasted for about 10 years. Now, there are times when disputes like this are breeding grounds for chaos and unrest. In the instance of the Hatfields and the McCoys, most of them were family members. But then there were some that actually just joined in on the fight. If I remember my history correctly, I believe the McCoys were wealthier than the Hatfields. I think the McCoys owned a few factories. And so some of the factory workers and their families got involved. So it wasn't necessarily just family members. But there was a lot of upset and anguish. And people just started going, hey, we're going to defend that person. And hey, and so this is where the beginning of jumping on the bandwagon started. Because they got excited. So the terminology of jumping on the bandwagon is actually the idea of following the crowd for excitement of events, not necessarily for the cause. That's what the concept of the bandwagon is. Now, I've witnessed this in my lifetime. I'm certain all of you have as well. But the one I'm going to is in 1992. Everybody remember the LA riots? That was 5 days, I think it was, 5 days. Actually, right around this time, April 29th, I think it was, until May something, where the city of Los Angeles became a war zone. I remember watching it on TV, just completely confused. Why are these people in the streets fighting? Now, if you know anything about the 1992 riots, for those youngins, do you guys know about it? Yeah, they're like, what? So here's your history lesson. Rodney King, does that name sound familiar? Rodney King was a black gentleman in LA who was beaten by white police officers, and it was video cammered, so videotaped. And once that went viral, now in the 90s, there wasn't an internet, so it was more just on TV, kind of, but once it went out there was great outrage. Police officers were arrested, but then they were acquitted. And the day they got acquitted, fights broke out in the street. Now I can understand people are upset and they're protesting, but what happened here for 5 days in the spring of 1992, 63 people were killed, 2,383 people were injured, and more than 12,000 people were arrested for violence or crimes. 12,000 for violence or crimes or any act of that. All of that happened in 5 days. 5 days. Yes, sir?
Did it say how much money and damage was caused too?
I didn't research that part, but I remember there was it was considered an area of catastrophe. The guard came in, National Guard came in to secure things. Curfew was put out in place. You could actually find some video online. It's quite disturbing. But the thing that's the most disturbing, and to me the most catastrophic, even out of all of those numbers, the one thing that I remember the most was Reginald Denning, the truck driver. I remember watching this video just sobbing. So here's this truck driver driving down the street. He's got his load in the truck and everything he's driving. He doesn't have a radio, so he doesn't know there's a riot happening. He gets off the freeway to try to take a shortcut, ends up smack in the middle of where these people are rioting. So they get in the way and they stop his truck and they won't let him move. So when his truck is stopped, now they called it the LA4, but there was actually 6 gentlemen who did this, but one of them climbed up, opened the door and yanked him out and proceeded to beat the daylights out of him. 4 people. On TV, there was a helicopter hovering around and the helicopter just happened to be right there. And so it's videotaping this white man being attacked by 4 black men. Now, In today's society, I'm actually a little hesitant to say 4 black people are beating up a white person because I don't want to cause upset and, well, he deserved. Please put all of the way. I'm talking factual. It was actually 6 black men beat up a white man just for being white because of everything that had occurred. I get it, Rodney King. But what happened is, because of the cause, people took license to be violent. They jumped on the bandwagon and started being physically aggressive and violent. They broke into stores, there was looting going on, setting fires, cars were set on fires and flipped over. If you were white, you did not show your face in LA for 5 days. It was just that bad. But anyway, with this beating, the thing that really bothered me the most about it is every time, so they pulled him out, they kicked him, they knocked him, one person stood on his neck, and then you see the 3 other people just beating on him in the face, in his abdomen. And as he started to stand, one of them, they rifled through his pockets to steal whatever they could steal from him, climbed up in the truck, grabbed this oxygen tank, and came and smacked him in the back and knocked him flat back down on the ground. And then when he tried to stand up again, another guy came running, a spectator came running from the crowd, a black man, and did a high kick right in the guy's face and flipped him backwards. And again, he tried to stand up, and that's when the most horrible scene was the gentleman came with the brick and hit him right in the head, and not like right in the face, I believe it was, and knocked him down to the ground. And all the while, nobody's doing anything. There's people in this, but the worst part of this was, as devastating as that was, with each blow and each kick, these kids jumped up and down and high-fived each other, and they're, yeah, like they're all excited, and they see the camera, and they're facing the camera. We got it, yeah, and they're happy about beating someone up. That was the most devastating thing to me, is to watch that excitement of injuring another human being. I remember sitting there, as I said, I was in tears, and just thinking, how can someone be happy to cause harm? Again, aside from the politics, I do understand. They were upset about the Rodney King verdict, or a police officer's verdict. I get it. But that doesn't advocate violence, from my mind. That violence had absolutely nothing to do with the case, as a matter of fact. It was just people jumping in on the bandwagon. And once they saw that they could get away with it, it continued on. I mean, it really did continue on until LA. If you saw some of those videos at night, all you saw was LA burning and smoke. It was just daunting to think that's happening in our country, right in the city, just along the way here. So, with that, I remember when I saw it, I didn't see black men attacking a white man. I saw people attacking a person who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that is such a horrible sentence to say because it nearly took his life. I mean, he almost died. I remember doing a follow-up story on him. He broke, there was like 19 bones shattered in his body. He still today has a hole in his skull that they couldn't repair from, I think, the brick. They said something about his eye, the whole socket was blown out. Anyway, he, a few months later, I think it was, I remember seeing a reporter doing a story on one of the guys, and the gentleman actually showed up in the hospital and apologized to him. One of the guys actually apologized to him for doing that. So as I said, the thing that really struck me was the violence that we saw unfolding. So that violence was just jumping on the bandwagon. Now, in 1992, when this was all occurring, I had been facilitating for just about a year. And I remember I was sitting there talking to George about this. Like, how is it possible that we're talking about finding value in people and being spiritual and making a contribution, and we see this on TV? Then how do we find value in that? I mean, what's the value of seeing this violence? And I remember the conversation, it was kind of very awkward, and I struggled because my heart just sank thinking that as human beings we can celebrate that. Again, that's what really got me, was we're celebrating our violence when we're capable of so much more. But yet here these guys are. Now, I'm not saying everybody, I'm just saying in that moment, in that event, that is what I witnessed. And LA burned for 5 days. Of course, we had the same thing happen in Baltimore in 2015, the Freddie Gray case, I think it was. Same thing, screaming, yelling, violent. sticks, rocks being thrown, they set the CVS on fire, had nothing to do with the verdict. It was just people just jumped on the bandwagon. So jumping on the bandwagon may not be a bad thing if the cause is righteous and if it's just. But to jump on the bandwagon just to be violent, I don't see the value in that. That to me I struggle with, is a license to be violent. So a few years ago, the movie The Purge, I didn't see it, but The Purge was, the idea is that for one day, you can do whatever you want. No laws. Kill, steal, arson, whatever you want. And the concept behind the movie is, or in the movie, I think it's to purge away all the bad people, but it's just one day a year that you could do this. I don't understand why Hollywood produces things like this, because one day people are going to actually vote on it and say, yeah, we have a purge day. Anyway. I have another quote for you that captured my attention. This is by Norman Vincent Peale. He says, "Action is a great restorer and builder of confidence." I believe this to be true. When we take action, we build confidence. Confidence in ourselves, we feel a conviction for something. Inaction is not only the result, but the cause of fear. Perhaps the action you take will be successful, and perhaps different action or adjustments will have to follow. But any action is better than no action at all. Now this is where I have to do that side note of Beauty and the Beast. I was telling you guys earlier. So there's a mob scene in Beauty and the Beast, and that's what I think about when it comes to jumping on the bandwagon, a mob scene. You know, when I think of mobs, I think, unfortunately, of the horrible events that happened to the South with the Ku Klux Klan, lynching people, just mobs getting together and dragging someone up and hanging them from a tree. That's what I think about when I think about a mob. But there's a scene in the movie, and the lines, I'm going to try not to sing, the lines say, "We're not safe until he's dead." So there's one person who feels threatened. We already know the Beast is not a bad guy, but there's one person, Gaston, he's threatened. So he says, "We're not safe until he's dead. He'll come stalking us at night." So he's starting to spread lies. "Set to sacrifice our children to his monstrous appetite." So he's sending messages. Now this monster is going to kill your kids. "He'll wreak havoc on our village if we let him wander free. So it's time to take some action, boys. It's time to follow me." I didn't sing. So he's trying to drum up the crowd. He's trying to get them all excited and lying to them to follow his cause and his agenda. Of course, we can definitely correlate that to the last 2 years of our political system. Just saying. So in this movie, where it comes to taking action, the idea of action was violence. Now, I'm not opposed to action, as I've already said, and even violent action. The Revolutionary War was a very violent war. The Civil War, brothers against brothers. It was violent, but it helped set slavery, ended slavery. So any war, from that matter, is actually a violent expression. Any war is a violent expression of action. And I believe that war is the final straw. It's like when all else fails, war is going to prevail. That's what we're going to end up having, when people have had enough and they go to war. Okay, I get it. But I don't think we should live in war every single day of our lives. It's necessary at times, but not every day. So there are action that we can take that doesn't have to be violent. As a matter of fact, voting is an action. If you want to be an advocate of change, vote. That's one thing. We can do peaceful, and I'm emphasizing the word peaceful. Peaceful protesting. We can have peaceful protesting. That's a form of action. As a matter of fact, any decision that I make is a form of action. I'm making a decision to do this. I'm making a decision to go here. I'm making a decision to read a book, associate, apply for a job. All of those are actions. So the concept would be then, here's what I got stuck with on this quote. I'm puzzled by one part of the quote. The quote that captures my attention the most is, "Inaction is not only the result, but the cause of fear." Now this bothered me, because I said earlier, I'm a person that doesn't like to take action. So does that mean that I'm operating out of fear? Now this is not a new thought to me, because as I said, I'm a person of inaction. I prefer not to be involved. I guess I would say I would call myself a spiritual person. I try to find the value on both sides. I look at both sides. I implement understanding as much as possible. I also have being an empath. Did I just create a word? Thank you. But being one of those, energy affects me. So even if somebody stands and starts talking very loudly, I cringe, I step back. Now, in the classroom, very different, because I'm trained to be different in the classroom. I can stand toe-to-toe with someone, not take offense, not take it personal, be there to be completely in service. Not a problem. But in my personal life, I don't want to take sides. I don't want to take action. Everyone in my family will tell you, I don't talk about politics, I don't talk about religion, I don't get involved in disputes. I'm the one who stays out of it. Now, this has caused me some stress, because there are some people who, you've got to take a stand. If we're all like you, we're going to be taken advantage of. Well, I have my points of view on that. I think that if you're a politician, be a politician. And if you're a teacher, be a teacher. If you're an engineer, be an engineer. But I don't feel like an engineer should be stepping up into the political world and telling the politics how to be politicians. Like, go for the field that you're in. So if you're a politic, be a politician. So in the last election, I remember hearing all this rhetoric and upset, and I finally said, listen, if you want to be involved, get involved. And that's the best solution. If you're really upset, go get involved. And the person I was talking to did. He signed up, he got registered, he's involved, and that's great. And I support you for that. Like, I don't want to take either side, but I think it's, for me, the idea of energy and what we're capable of doing. If I had an hour to spend with you, would I choose to spend this hour in an argument of debate of something that I can actually not control the outcome to, or would I rather spend the time discussing philosophy, ideas, creating beauty and joy and laughter, something we can participate in? That's where I would say yes. I would prefer that rather than, I don't want to say wasting energy because I don't want to discount anyone, but for me, it wouldn't seem an appropriate use of my energy. I'd rather go for a more spiritual aspect. And as I said, this has gotten me into trouble sometimes. I remember one time I had this question. I asked George about this. I said that, I don't want to be in the middle of conflict. And one afternoon we were talking about this. We were sitting outside on his patio. I was looking at the mountain, and I don't remember what brought the subject up. But I was mentioning how I don't want to be in the middle of a conflict, and he looked at me very squarely and said, well, that's because you're afraid of being wrong. I'm like, I'm not afraid of being wrong. I'm going to make a facilitator. I don't care if I'm wrong. A little arrogant. And I said, what do you mean I'm afraid of being wrong? And then he said, well, let me ask you these questions. And he started asking me some questions that didn't have definitive answers, like, what's the philosophy of sand? Or, why does the sun rotate? Just things that you didn't know the answer to. I wrote some of these down here. Oh, how do you solve world hunger? Why do we get sad? And when should one person speak up? And so I remember this clearly. I'm sitting there thinking, well, how do I answer this question? In my head, what does George want to hear? I hear myself say, what does George want to hear? So I'm now searching in my head to come up with an answer for what George wants to hear rather than what I think. And that's when it hit me. Oh my gosh, he's right. I'm afraid of being wrong. That never occurred to me. I'm trying to find the right answer. There is no right answer, but I'm trying to come up with the right answer. That really shook me for a minute because I thought, wow, I would have never thought I was afraid to be wrong because I don't, you're wrong. Okay, no problem, move on. But as I was contemplating these, that's when George started laughing and he said, you're waiting for you to come up with the right answer, aren't you? I'm like, yes. And he said, that's just what it is. And so, we continued talking about that, and of course George is the first one who introduced me to the idea of finding value. So how can I find value and take a position? We're supposed to find value in everything, then how do I find that position when we're supposed to find value in everything? I don't want to go out there and chant in the streets. And he said, which some of you may know this idea, that I could be the best that I can be without any aggression towards the opposite side. So if I want to be a soldier, be the best soldier that I could be without hating the opposition. Now that makes sense to me. Okay, I could take the position that I stand in and not be judgmental of anyone else. I can grab that. I can understand that. But then it still doesn't make me want to get involved in the fight. And that's when George said, I'm not a fighter, which I believe that. Michael Jackson, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Remember when he said that line? Yeah, I dated myself. You know who Michael Jackson is, right? Okay. But I really do believe but that's the part of me. I don't want to be a fight. I don't want to be involved in the fight, mostly because of the energy and the upset that gets involved. So I remember I said that I wanted to have more of a spiritual life, which I do. And I really try not to take sides. It's been 28 years now that I've been working on this. I'm not mastered it by far, but I do have more of a centered opinion, and I feel good about that. Even though I still to this day get accused of being aloof or flat out, like heartless. You're heartless. How can you not be involved? Okay, everyone has a right to their opinion. Now, I've battled my own demons on this for another reason. Suppose you see a woman in the grocery store who's beating their child, slapping their kid around. What do? Now, most people would say, well, they go and intervene. And I would want to do that too, because I believe in nonviolence, especially towards children. Our job is to raise them up. So I understand that. But I've also had the experience of when somebody intervened with my mother. So I've been on the opposite side. As a little girl in the grocery store, a woman approached my mother and disapproved of her behavior towards me. My mom used to love to smack me in the face. So I think she was smacking me about for something. And I remember when this woman approached, and my mother got very calm and quiet and grabbed my hand very tightly, and I thought, uh-oh, here it comes. Took me home, and sure enough, behind the walls of our house, I got far worse than I would have gotten when I was in the store. Now, this happened more than once, on more than one occasion, to where I started to be fearful that somebody would see what was happening. So I learned how not to scream out loud. If I got slapped, I learned not to make a noise because I didn't want to draw any attention to me. So I've been on the flip side of that, where somebody actually did interfere, and it made it worse for me. It made it worse. So now, when I see a woman with her child in the store, I'm at a quandary. What do? So the thought that goes through my head, and this is what I really came down to, it's not whether or not I take action, but what will the impact of my action be after I walk away? That's something to consider. It's kind of easy to take action, especially if we get our emotions involved and, yeah, that's what I feel, and we jump in. But do we really consider what happens when we walk away? When the music is over, then what? Has our action made a contribution, or has it made it worse? So that is where I freeze. And that's probably where I think about what the right thing to do is. Is that little child going to be injured more? Am I jumping to a conclusion? As a matter of fact, one time I was in the grocery store, I was in Costco with my daughter, and my grandson was quite young, he was maybe 2, and I'm teasing him, messing around with him, he's a boy, we're slapping around. Well, he reaches over and smacked me in the face. I mean, he didn't do it on purpose, we're playing. But he hits me in the face just as my daughter turns and sees him do that. And before I could say anything, she called him out by name and very scoldingly, "We don't hit people!" And then she slapped him in the leg. And I sat there, I saw her, and the woman across the way who was passing me, we kind of just looked at each other and started giggling. And then my daughter looked at me and saw the other woman. We just busted out laughing, which was really good, because then my grandson, he didn't know if he was getting yelled at or being, and then he laughed, and then he thought it was okay to slap, so he started slapping. But now that's funny. However, what if I wasn't there and some woman saw her slap her son and approached her? Don't treat your children that way. Like, what if they misread or misunderstood? Which leads me to the next topic. What if I'm misunderstanding a situation? How do I know if I get involved, it's actually on the right premise? Have you ever been in an argument only to discover that you misunderstood from the very beginning and you've been arguing the same side, but you're saying that, like, isn't that bizarre? And then nobody wants to admit that they misunderstood. Oh, well, that's what I mean. And we try to play a war of words, but that's what happens. Sometimes we misunderstand and we get all upset and I'm gonna get in your face, but it really was just a simple misunderstanding. So that's something to consider as well when we think about being on the bandwagon or jumping in. on the bandwagon. So I think about how much energy that we spent, upset or anger that we get involved in. So again, the woman in the store, she's mishandling her child. I could stand there and get upset and angry. I can go in there and interact and interrupt. I could do nothing and just observe. So I remember I read this study that was done where they actually put a child in harm's way and they observed people around. And if it was a child a certain age or younger, people interfered. If it was a teenager, no one really, kind of half, it was like 50-50. If it was like an older person, not so much. It was surprising to see the age ratio. But most people, and what the study came down to, eventually then they asked the kid, how did they feel? And the kid always felt better when someone looked at them and said, are you okay? Instead of addressing the parent, they addressed the child. And then sometimes they didn't because, you know, you're too afraid to speak. I remember how many times I left the house where I was told, if you say one thing that happens in this house, I will kill you. And trust me, I believed that statement. So when somebody would ask me if I'm okay, freeze, not a word, or just smile, yes. So I remember thinking when I was a little girl, I should be an actress because I'm so good at this. I still think that. Yeah, no one's laughing. Okay. Thank you for the courtesy laugh. So back to the idea with the person. What do we do? So I actually wanted to give you a little bit of time to talk to someone, and that's what I'm going to do. Have a moment, talk to the person next to you. What would you do if that was you? What would you do if you came across a woman who was mistreating her child? Obviously, mistreating her child. So take a moment and talk to somebody right now about that. You two online. Take a moment, have a conversation.
Like in a grocery store?
In a grocery store. All right, if I can have your attention, please. How many people would intervene? I just want to get an idea. How many people would go and intervene? How many people would have talked to the adult? How many people would talk to the child? And then how many people would do nothing?
I would just probably watch for a while.
Just observe for a while? You would do the same thing, just to...
You felt like, depending how bad it was, like if it was like, they were like beating, maybe causing bruises, like broken bones,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe go up to them and be like, don't you think you're taking this too far, type of thing.
Okay.
Like just bringing that aware to them.
Right.
But if it was just like a smack, I don't know, I feel like it wasn't my place to intervene, because I don't know what they did. Maybe the kid did something really, really bad,
Correct.
you know?
Absolutely. All right, that's good. And assuming all of you online probably had your own experiences as well. I was thinking about, I think this happened maybe about a month ago. There was a little girl who was running late to school. Most of everybody had gone into the school. And as she was approaching the steps, I think she was 8 or 9, maybe 12, but short for her age, very tiny. and a woman grabbed her and wrapped both her arms around her and started dragging her away. And one of the moms who had just dropped off her kids happened to notice it. She was in the van. And she kind of looked and saw, and she could see the terror in the little girl's eyes. Now, sometimes we don't know what's going on. As you mentioned, we don't really know what's going on. So what the mom did was she unrolled her window and mouthed the words to the little girl, "Are you okay?" And the little girl shook her head. And so the lady yelled and said, "Get your hands off of my daughter." And the woman let go and ran away. And sure enough, the lady was trying to abduct the little girl. So the mom jumped out when she saw that. She went out, and the little girl was all shaking and everything. And when they went inside, called the cops. They caught the lady. They caught her. She was really trying to abduct the little girl. So sometimes it doesn't even have to be violent. We just have to pay attention to what's unfolding. And so they asked the woman who was in the van, "What made you do that?" And she said there was just something about the situation that didn't seem right. Like, I've seen people try to pick up kids, and I've seen the temper tantrums, but there was something about this that just wasn't right. So I think sometimes that's the thing where I would come to the answer is, check inside. Does this feel right? Like, am I being judgmental, critical, or is there really something wrong here? Now, sometimes we might know, sometimes we may not, but there's nothing wrong with checking. And I think the mom did a very good job by just simply mouthing the words, "Are you okay?" And the little girl could have just said yes, and just the fact that she was so frightened and she just said no. And the woman just was the more aggressive she got, whatnot. But see, that to me is an excellent indication of when you interfere. She saved that little girl's life. That's a great example of when we interfere. And then, of course, I've had my own side of when people did interfere, and it made it worse. There's a country song by Aaron Tippin. That's for you, David. Country music. He went to Nashville this weekend. Anyway, there's a country song that says, "You've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything." And I think that's a great line. You've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. So the question, I would think, what do I stand for then? Which I think is a great question to ask yourselves. What do you stand for? So when you say, what do you stand for, it means, what's your convictions? What do you believe in? What are the things that motivate you and inspire you? Not just, I do a little this, I do a little that, but it's really the passion, I guess is the concept I would have, is that passion that propels you forward to get involved. Because we get involved in many things, whether it be a faith-based religion, or it might be a spiritual venture, it might just be your job or family. I mean, there's so many things to be involved in. What is it that you get involved in, and how much of yourself do you give to the thing that you're the most involved in? Now, for me, of course, this is an easy one, Omega. It's my life, it's what I'm involved in. Not everybody has the luxury of having it just handed to you. So all of us have to find out, what is it that we want to do? What is it that you get involved in and stand for? That your convictions would be, no matter what, this is what I'm going to do. History is filled with a number of people who'd actually say, do or die, this is it. What was the gentleman's name in the Civil War who said, give me liberty or give me death? Thank you, Nathan Hale. Give me liberty or give me death. He was ready to die for his convictions, which I think is quite beautiful. I remember in World War I, kamikazes. Was that World War I? No. World War II, thank you. In World War II, the kamikazes, I'm terrible on history. The kamikazes were the most dangerous people on the planet. Why? They were willing to die, and died for their cause. They took their plane and crashed into boats using their planes as weapons. That was the most dangerous enemy you can have, somebody who's not afraid to die. That was fantastic, that they're willing to die for their cause. I mean, not fantastic that they caused damage, but they were willing to die for their cause. You understand that. That's what I mean. So it's that voice that says to you, this is it, this is what I'm going to do. So then the questions we'd have to ask, do you speak up and defend yourself? There's someone on the roof. Santa, you're early. Yeah. Sorry. Do you speak up and let your voice be heard? Or sometimes people just let their voices be heard, like on the social media. I think social media has really broken and allowed people to let their voices, otherwise that may not have had the opportunity, so their voices are heard. So some people, I've heard the terminology, flex their internet muscles. Here they are spouting, but if you get them one-on-one, they don't have anything to say. But the safety of their room. So we have that. Now remember that the things that we stand for, I forgot the one other thing. Finding the thing that we're allowed to fight for our voice, but then where do you draw the line and say enough's enough? Sometimes you have to know when the fight is over. And sometimes people don't. They just keep going and going and going until there's no one left standing. And sometimes you have to come to a resolve. That's what peace treaties are in wars. It comes to a peace treaty where we say, okay, that's it, we're going to stop fighting. And they sign a peace treaty and then they proceed forward. So we have to know when there's a line as well. Now, of course, I don't have any of these answers. I just have questions to ask yourself. The other question I think of is, what does it do to our soul, our human soul, when I take a stand? Or if I don't take a stand? What does it do to our soul? I've seen people who don't take stands and they withdraw. I've seen people who take stands and they take too much of a stand and cause the opposite effect. So there's got to be that balance in there. What do I stand for? What can I stop? When do I step up? When do I pull back? Stepping into it, again, it's the idea of knowing what's appropriate and the position that I take the stand for. History, as I said, is filled with many great people. Mother Teresa took a stand for poverty. She took a stand for not throwing away children. That's how the orphanages started. People who just tossed their children away. She said every child deserves to be loved, no matter what. Every child deserves to be loved. Martin Luther King took a stand. Rosa Parks took a stand. So these are great figures in our history that were willing to go against. I mean, I think what incredible courage Rosa Parks had to have be able to say, no, I'm not moving. I'm tired. I'm not moving. I mean, I don't know if I'd have the conviction to do that. I mean, that was just beautiful if you understand that story. Or the people who, fought for against slavery, who did the Underground Railroad, all of those people. The people who took Jewish people out of the Nazi environment. That was taking a stand. The people who helped individuals like Albert Einstein or Anne Franks, the ones who really went against the system knowing that it could cost their lives. Now, as I said, social media has given us a voice to people who otherwise may not have the courage to stand up. Great benefit for this, but it also can have an opposite effect. So cyberbullying, something I didn't grow up with because there was no such thing as the internet when I was growing up. But today, cyberbullying is, I would say, probably more detrimental than actual bullying, because the teenagers today, their media presence and their image is everything to them. That's huge to them. And to have that being attacked, it can be quite devastating, especially to an impressionable teenager. Because even though, minus the cyberbullying and everything, we still have teenagers going through the hormone stages, becoming adults. Now add the pressures of being a teenager in today's society. They say that teenage suicide is on the rise, which I find very sad, but it's on the rise. I read an article today in September of 2017. They said the statistics were every 40 seconds somebody took their life. Every 40 seconds. Now, I don't know how accurate that is. And it wasn't just teenagers. It was collectively speaking. Every 40 seconds, a human being will take their life. So when I think about cyberbullying, I think about, the stories where you hear the friends make the pacts and we're going to kill each other. And as a matter of fact, we did have somebody in Omega, her daughter made the pact with a bunch of her friends. They're all going to kill each other at the same time. And 2 of the 3 did it. Her daughter was one of them, where they just checked out. They're like, that's it, I'm done. So that can be the bad effect of taking a stand. And again, joining on the bandwagon. If you've ever read, I do not read the comments. I don't. I'm just a person who does not read comments. I don't want to know. You have your opinion. But every once in a while, somebody will say something to me. Did you see what somebody wrote? Or I'll catch a word and I'll go, what? And I'll scroll down and I'll just see all these horrible things that people are spouting. One thing that I found very beautiful, Sandra Bullock did this. She was doing a presentation a few years back, and she said she Googled herself because she wanted to see what people were saying. And she was devastated. You know, that woman shouldn't be along. She's so ugly. She can't act. I mean, it was just negative, 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 negative. And she went through and actually read what someone actually had written about her. And I'm sitting there thinking, why would somebody post that? Like, what's the point? You know, you're ugly. Why do you say that? That's just like being excited about beating somebody up. You know, hey, I get to be mean to somebody. But anyway, she read through it and she said, normally that would have taken her at least a half an hour or a day to get over. Now she doesn't even consider, it's not even worth her time, because everyone has a right to their opinion and she knows she's so much more than that. But again, go back to the impressionable teenagers. That means everything to them. And then we jump on the bandwagon. Yeah, I heard you say that. No, no, no. And then back and forth and back and forth and back, and you build this big, huge thing over what something might even could be a misunderstanding at times. So that's the negative effect of the social media. But the positive effect, which I always like to look at, the positive side, I recently read this Good News Network. Anybody get that one? I love that. Good News Network, it's they actually send them out daily now, but it's a network, a website that's designed just for good news. There's no negative, it's all positive things, what people are doing, little kids who are making inventions, a kid who came up with an invention. I just saw this one today. He created a plastic bottle that will disintegrate in 3 days. So there's no plastic waste. I mean, that's phenomenal. Or they show stories of police officers going out of their way above and beyond for people, or kids, human kindness. Anyway, so I like reading this. So there was this one beautiful story. There was this girl, 11 years old, and I don't remember the state that she was in, but her best friend had cancer. And due to chemo, she lost all her hair. So this girl decided to shave her head in support of her best friend, so her best friend wouldn't feel sad or anything. Well, when she went to school, which was a private school, they expelled her because it was against the dress code. Against the dress code. Can you believe that? So this little girl shows up, shaves her head in support of her friend, and then she gets kicked out of school because she's breaking the dress code. Now, positive thing, social media went nuts. They went nuts. Everyone's putting their 2 cents in. Everyone's saying, don't you realize what this little girl did? How can you be punishing her for having a heart? Blah, 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 blah. Within a matter of days, the school recanted and naturally brought her back in. So that's a positive of how social media, your voice could be heard. No aggression, no upset, just, hey guys, this is inappropriate, look what's happening. And we have a lot of those stories on the internet nowadays where people are bringing our attention to things that we may not know that have been unfolding, going, oh my gosh, we should do something about this. So I think the social media actually gives people more of an opportunity to find purpose and value than before it existed, because there's so many options out there now. There's so much to get involved in out there now. And so it's at our fingertips. We can grab hold of this. You see, with the power and the pressure of the social media, we can actually use it to our advantage and to the advantage of the individuals that we're supporting. GoFundMe, another great site. You know, somebody, of course, other people take advantage of it. I just want to be honest, I don't want to work. And he had money coming to him because people thought, that's really funny. Here you go, have some money. And then, of course, there are people who have noble causes that they want to do. They start up their GoFundMe account, which I think is great as well. So as I said, that is a very good contribution that we can make with the social media. So back to the idea of jumping on the bandwagon. I feel like, me personally, I feel like my teachings and the things that I've looked through in philosophy, it's not like I ever read anything that Socrates said, yeah, jump on the bandwagon, or Buddha encouraged everyone to get excited and go convert the world. As a matter of fact, if you read through Muhammad, Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Confucius, none of them solicited their religion. It was the disciples that built the foundation. They just went around and talked. Muhammad never wrote a word. It was his disciples who wrote all the information down. And I believe the same was true with Buddha, and I know Confucius did write a couple of things. But anyway, it was the support system that made it like it was their purpose. So these teachers who came onto the planet really were just being teachers and passing on the information and knowledge. And it was the ones who were passionate about it, those are the ones who took it forward, which I think is what we can do as well. Find that we believe in and take it forward. Dedicate your life to it. Again, I find it easy for me to say that because I have Omega. And I know I've had people come to me and say, well, how do I find my purpose? I don't have the answer for that. You have to find what feeds the fire within you. Everyone has something that ignites their fire, ignites what they want to make a contribution to. I would caution you, though, to use your voice consciously. To join a battle consciously, not reactively. Yeah, let's get them. No, don't do that. That's just going to cause more violence. To consider what happens after you've made your contribution. To consider that. Make a conscious choice. If I do this, what's going to occur when I walk away? Or will I walk away? Can I stay committed to it? Or what is my action going to do in this instance, in this matter? To consider that. Once you weigh those options, then make your choice. Naturally, make your choice. Pick your battles. I always like the idea, I read this article one time, many years ago. It was on George Clooney. And the reporter was asking how come he doesn't do any advertising for things. And he said, you know, I get asked to show up on this show and that show and this show, and before you know it, nobody takes me serious anymore because you see me all the time. So when I pick a cause, and I stick with it. And I thought that was such a beautiful, I think it was George Clooney, I'm just going to give it to him. But that's the idea, not to show up everywhere, but to find the one thing that you're the most passionate about and really give it your strength. And I remember thinking that's quite true. If you show up everywhere, people are just so used to you, no one listens to you anymore. But when you pick your cause and then you put your voice to it, people will pay attention. So pick your battles. It doesn't just have to be one. I would just pick your battles, make sure you're conscious of it. See, I have the idea that when I choose with intention and I direct my attention with conviction and with purpose and dedication, I think that's a brilliant way for me to express my voice. So I intend, this is where I want to go. I direct myself and stay focused. And then I produce or make a contribution to that which I'm giving my voice to. Walter Russell was a polymath. Polymath is somebody who excels in more than one field. He excelled in at least 5 to 10 different areas. He was a physicist, an architect, a sculptor, a painter. He bred horses, mathematician. Anyway, so Walter Russell said the one thing that he attributed to his success is he gave himself 2-hour increments. In 2 hours in the morning, he'd go with his horses, and he'd groom and take care of them. And the next 2 hours, he'd go and sculpt. And the next 2 hours, he'd work on his mathematician stuff. And the next 2 hours, like he broke himself up into a place so he never lost interest, but he kept himself energetic about it. And somebody asked him, he was a great sculptor. I mean, he did incredible sculptures. If you've ever get a chance to look at this gentleman, really, just truly, he did, I want to say 6 presidents, the bust of the presidents. He was just phenomenal. It was lifelike. Anyway, one person asked him, you mean at 2 hours you stop sculpting? What happens if you're breaking the creativity? And he said he's done this enough to know that when he walks away, he comes back with a better idea in his head than where he was going. And, you know, he was quite successful, so I think he had the key. So you don't have to just give your voice to one thing, but choose it, and choose it wisely and with intention. Is the key here, is with your intention, not reaction. See, that's the idea. I think the bandwagon is about reactions, the excitement of the thrill of the chase. And we may not know what we're chasing, but we get excited. Yeah! Again, going back to that video, that very sad video that I saw, I don't think you can even find it anymore, but of just them celebrating injuring this person. Why would we celebrate when we can celebrate life instead of celebrate destruction? So that's where I would leave it with you, is the idea I would leave with you is, if you did have a difference or could make a difference today, what would it be? What would the difference that you would make today? What difference could you do tomorrow? And perhaps maybe for your life, what difference can you make? Are you content not making a difference if you're not making a difference? And if you are, where do you make a difference? I have this paper hanging up in my office. One of my kids typed up this paper when she was 16 years old. She had to write about her hero. And so she typed it up, and I was taking her to school, and she said, here, I got you something, but you can't read this until I get out of the car. Okay, whatever, honey. So I should say, these are George's grandchildren. That's kind of how I got involved in their life. But anyway, so she was the oldest one. And I dropped her off, and I picked up the paper, and as she got out, I watched her go through metal detector to get into high school. That's how great it was back then. It was 1996, I think, is when she wrote this to me. Anyway, the first line says, Anne Marie is my hero. And I went, that's it, I can't read this. I'm going to cry. But as I read through it, it's very cute. She starts it up, Anne Marie is my hero. She's not any gorgeous model or anything. She's just a regular average person. I'm like, thanks, hon. But then she detailed how, ever since she met me, she looked up to me. I act cool in front of her friends, not like an old, boring lady. Her words, not like an old, boring lady, but like a mom when she needs me to be a mom. And how I always stay calm in crisis, even when her sister and her were fighting, which I would at times. But anyway, I always read that every once in a while, especially because I'm not close with them that much anymore. They've gotten their own lives, they've got their own kids, and they're moved out into different parts of the city, and I don't see them every day like I used to. I actually don't even see them maybe once or twice a year. I don't hardly hear from them. But every once in a while, I'll feel like, gosh, I miss them, and then I'll read that, and it'll remind me, you know what? I don't need to be in their life to realize I've made a contribution. And it's not about me. It's the idea that my presence made a contribution. And what are they doing with their lives? Because I was in their life. And I was in their life because George was in my life. It just patterned down, patterned down, patterned down. So then I would challenge you, think of the people in your life. Who would say that you made a contribution to them? And what contribution was it? As well as recognizing the people who make contributions to you. I think that's the balance. Who makes contributions to us and who we make contributions to. And to realize it's not about you. Never has been, never will be. I read this great quote the other day where it said that if I were to understand the highest level of happiness comes to me when I am in service to another human being. It's not about me. It's about the idea of being in service to another human being. And I really believe that. I think that's when I experience the most happiness. And I think that's when I watch other people. The silent giving, how excited and happy. If you've ever watched a kid give a gift, they get so excited because they get to give something and nobody knows that, like the Secret Santa thing. I think it's true that the highest level of happiness is when I'm in service to another human being. It has nothing to do with me. So that's what I would leave you with. If you have a place of service, and what kind of difference and dedication you can make to others. So thank you all for showing up tonight. Thank you all for coming online. Remember that we have Mega 1 that starts on Friday. I will see you in the next Wednesday night workshop. It's not in 2 weeks. It'll actually be in 3 because there's 5 weeks in May. So it'll be on the 24th, I believe. And the topic, I don't remember what I chose. Go online and you'll find out what the topic is. Thank you all for being here. Have a pleasant night. Good night.